please remember none of this is financial advice. The battle between every startup and incumbent comes down to whether the startup gets distribution before the incumbents gets innovation.
Yeah, so we've built this platform on a ERC20 EVM compatible protocol, which is really important. There's a lot of legislation out there in the marketplace right now in regards to stablecoins and crypto. And if any of these bills pass and our clients want to start using these, we'll have an enabled platform.
This is Ryan Rugger from Citibank. She just said it depends on the regulations, but if the regulations support it, like the Stablecoin Act, they're going to come on and start issuing deposits on public blockchains. This is one of the most bullish statements for crypto that I've heard in a long time. Citibank is one of the largest banks in the world, and they're going to issue deposits right on chain as long as the regulations support that. And we know in the United States that the Stablecoin Act is coming up soon. Now think about this setup. We need a reset. The system is broken. There is a debt problem. There's a financial meltdown underway, and Citi is already upgrading to a private permission version of Ethereum.
So having this ERC20 token, which will be fungible, today, day one, we're doing it for, tokenized deposits, cash management, efficiencies in trade, but really future proofing and working with clients to build this out. So, we mentioned Maersk, which is one of our pilot clients, and really helping to build out the functionality in our roadmap, which includes not just the Citi token. We want to work with other banks.
So there is commercial bank money, there's cash, there's central bank money, there's reserves, there's all different types of money. When you put $100 in the bank, you can go and use your debit card anywhere. That's called commercial bank money. Now, here's the thing. Commercial banks lever every dollar that you put into your bank, 10x it, fractional reserve lending. And it turns out that this market is a $17 trillion market cap. Now, imagine if that were to be tokenized and put into public blockchains, because that's what she was saying. If stablecoin regulations come out and they allow the banks to tokenize deposits, they will, as long as the customer wants it. And the customer, now with tokenized deposits, are going to have a lot of different options. Before we continue, I'd like to thank the sponsors of this show, incogni.com/Darren. Recently, there was a cyber attack.
Caesars Entertainment confirming customer information was stolen, including driver's license numbers and social security numbers.
It looks like a hacking group broke into Caesar's palace and demanded information. It was a ransomware attack. But what ends up happening is these hackers steal information and then they post it on the dark web. Data brokerages have artificial intelligence just collecting data. The AI does not have ethics. There's no ethics with an AI. It's a computer program that does not know what's right and wrong. So it's collecting data. Even if it's unethical, they will take the data and make a file about you. And this is where Incogni comes in. Incogni will ask every single database to remove the information that they have collected about you. By law, each one of these databases are required to remove your information. And if you use my link, incogni.com/Darren, you'll get up to 60% off the annual plan. So this is a 30-day money-back guarantee. If you don't like it, you can get your money back within 30 days.
I have to pay attention to the implications of the great disruptions that are going to take place. Because the world will be radically different in 5 years. And it's going to go year by year, become radically different. Next elections, the debt situation, all of these things are going to change. And then with the new technologies, it's like going through a time warp. We're going to be in a different world, okay? And the disruptors will be disrupted.
Ray Dalio is saying that we are about to enter a time warp. Now think about that. He is one of the richest people in the world. He started off in middle class and now is a multi-billionaire. So he knows a thing or two about markets and he understands macroeconomics, and he's picked out a pattern a pattern that's clearly identifiable. And that's the end of a great empire. The United States, the reserve currency, is in decline. Our debt situation is at max. And usually, when things like this happen, we start to see changes. And that's what he's saying. We're going to enter warp speed. We're going to see changes happening by the year. The disruptors are about to be disrupted. So the United States is the last of the party because the U.S. system works by regulatory capture. The incumbents control the regulators. And she just revealed something to you. She said with these stablecoin acts that are coming up, there may be regulation for tokenized deposits. Citibank, JP Morgan, HSBC, these are the incumbents that rule the correspondent banking system. They know because they control the regulator, regulatory capture. And she's telling you that this is coming.
Are there clients that you are able to share with us, just to give us a little example of how this is being implemented in the real world?
Yeah, absolutely. So Maersk is one of our large pilot clients that we did. And as Maersk passed through a canal, they automatically pre-funded a smart contract with tokens. And then once they received the services, the token was automatically paid out. So as you can imagine, trade is a very paper-ridden, not digital first kind of business that we're looking to digitize and add those efficiencies for our clients.
They automatically pre-fund a smart contract. So right there, the whole Nostro and Vostro thing still exists, even with an upgraded version of Citibank's ledger, and it's an Ethereum version of Citibank's ledger. It still exists because Nostro and Vostro just means that there's a bunch of banks that are partnered with Citi that all accept Citi tokens. So they have to pre-fund those with Citibank IOUs, basically, that are tokenized at this point. So they're tokenized deposits of Citibank. Citibank has a centralized ledger. Maersk has tokens in one wallet, and as soon as the ship lands in the port, a smart contract moves it from one wallet to another wallet. This is the Regulated Liability Network white paper, and they talk about a global settlement asset. So meanwhile, the lack of global settlement system leads to frictions in vital operations, such as international payments. We have solved the problem of financial messaging. Structured payment messages are transmitted between two counterparties at the speed of light. The missing piece of the puzzle is a global solution for settlement. Citi's tokenized service is different than the Regulated Liability Network. The Regulated Liability Network is just that. Banks, central banks, they issue tokens directly on a global ledger that Citibank started. Everybody issues their tokens and say, we back these liabilities, regulated liabilities. We back these liabilities that we put on the shared ledger. Now, here's Marcus Treacher sharing Ripple's story and views on the future of banking, transfers, and settlement powered by blockchain technology, Citi DigiMoney. And the host is Tony McLaughlin. This is the guy that set up the Regulated Liability Network.
Very unlikely that sovereign nations will accept Bitcoin as a challenge to their national currencies. And so I think that governments will be perfectly happy to legitimize Bitcoin as a kind of alternative investment, but not as a medium of exchange.
Roy, I see you nodding your head along there.
I tend to agree with what Tony's saying. I mean, you'll see.
This is on Tony McLaughlin's YouTube page. You can see that it's unlisted. Now, Marcus Treacher spoke with Tony McLaughlin in 2018. I tried to find the symposium, but there's no recording. Citibank has a link to it, but when you click on the link, it says 404 not found. And the same goes for the documents. I've gone in the Wayback Machine and I had no luck. But I have found this clip from Marcus Treacher speaking to a lady from Citibank. Now, keep in mind, the Regulated Liability Network did not exist at this time. And now the RLN network is saying on their website that this is the internet of value.
Great. And are you seeing adoption vary between the various partners? How likely are the larger, let's say, financial institutions to adopt versus maybe some of the smaller ones?
Yeah,
it's a very broad church, and we have customers among the biggest banks in the world. For example, Bank of Tokyo, Mitsubishi, Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, Santander, Standard Chartered Bank, as well as some of the very fast-moving digital banks like Axis Bank in India, or Yes Bank, or IndusInd, for example. So we've got a very broad collection of customers, and also payment companies as well.
A major U.S. financial institution on an agreement with Ripple Labs and two major European banks for the settlement of FX trades on the RippleNet platform. This came from a Sutherland's law firm site, and what this is getting at is that this is happening on a grand scale. You're seeing a major U.S. financial institution. So who are they talking about? Maybe Bank of America. Understand that Bank of America would be competition to Citibank. And what was interesting in this thing is that she was pressing questions about centralized, decentralized. Is it a security? Is it a commodity? Also, Sullivan and Cromwell are the regulated liability networks law firm. Ripple has been buying up the infrastructure, including Fortress Trust and Medico. As soon as Ripple bought Medico, Citibank dropped out.
So if you were to classify cryptocurrency, is it a commodity? Is it an investment vehicle? Is it what is it? It seems like it plays different roles depending what the end user wants.
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the errors that people make today is to club this together as one thing. So within the term cryptocurrency, digital asset, there are actually many, many, many use cases and flavors.
Great. And is the solution, will it become more of a central entity, or do you still see room for many players in this space?
Yeah, it's the latter. So we have created an internet model for moving value. So what we have created is, if you like, an internet for value, an IOV. And the banks that work with us, and also the payment companies that also implement Ripple, use us as if they were transacting over the internet. The difference being, by using Ripple technology, they can move value safely without any double spend problem or any risk of loss over that connection. Whereas in the internet today, that is not possible with pure messaging. So it's if you like, a value movement solution that has an internet model. And the internet is very inclusive. It's not centralized. It's not a tight club. It's open to everybody in the world.
So keep in mind, this is in 2018. She's asking him, is this centralized, decentralized? Is this a security? Is this a commodity? And these topics weren't really popular back then. And this is her key questions. Now, the other thing is the regulated liability network did not exist at this time. The phrase the internet of value, I've only heard from Ripple executives like Chris Larson or Brad Garlinghouse or employees from Ripple. Now, Tony McLaughlin meets with Marcus Treacher in 2018, and then he comes out with the regulated liability network and uses the term the regulated internet of value. He's trying to set up a shared ledger between all of the incumbents, all of the central banks. And so you have to assume that every central bank in the world is going to get together and use this regulated liability network, where enemies like the Bank of Russia, the Bank of China, the Bank of the United States, the Bank of Mexico, everybody issues their own regulated liabilities on one network, a walled garden speaking to walled gardens. I'm doubtful it works. Now, Mickey B. Fresh released a video called Project Prisma, and Project Prisma came out through the court cases that Ripple is working on this way of pooling liquidity all over the globe using API interfaces, using artificial intelligence and machine learning to help manage this liquidity and make it more usable with digital identities and being able to create KYC and AML compliance. You can have institutions that both stake their assets, so they stake their assets and pool their assets together, and then on top of it, they could send transactions through it. So you could both own your assets and at the same time own the LP tokens, which would be like an option call on the assets that you own. So it's a flywheel effect. It's the snake eating its own tail. The more liquid, the more fees that go through it, the more liquid it becomes, and so on and so on. The bigger the institutions can get involved, the more assets they could stake, the more assets they could push through. So it literally has a snowball effect. On top of that, it's what Ray Dalio said. There's no more need for a reserve currency. You can swap assets instantaneously. What does the world look like when everything is 24/7, 365? When all financial services are, the fees are dropped down to a negligible amount. And on top of it, no middlemen risk losing their positions of power.
It's multi-asset in a way that the traditional financial system is not. We're very siloed in traditional finance, and it's programmable. And so I think the project really is to examine this tokenization thesis and whether you can take that shared ledger technology and apply it to, and this is the key point, existing legal instruments. I think in the blockchain world where we have this idea that code is law, that's completely wrong. Law is law. And existing legal instruments can be expressed on blockchains without changing the law, because at the end of the day, a blockchain is just a database.
But
the XRP ledger shares a philosophy, just like Bitcoin shares a philosophy, Ethereum, they all have philosophies, right? On Bitcoin and Ethereum, you're never going to change the idea that code is not law. Code is law on Bitcoin and Ethereum. That's why the miners still exist on Bitcoin. They're never going to change that. They don't care about the environment. They don't care about any excuse that you bring to them. And God bless. I like Bitcoin for that reason. Now, on the XRP ledger, I think the philosophy is a bit more flexible. The IOU system, for example, allows you to freeze IOUs, or there's an amendment for clawbacks. There's an amendment for identity.
So if you were to ask anyone who's operating on the public blockchain, like Ethereum, how do you know that you're not paying gas fees to criminals and sanctioned entities? You can't know.
And gas fees are?
Gas fees are the currency within Ethereum. So I know you've told me before not to use jargon.
I asked. I think asked is nicer than told.
But gas fees, it's a pay to play, right? So whether you're doing computation or storage on Ethereum, you have to pay gas fees.
And you could be financing terrorists for all you know.
And you cannot be a responsible financial institution issuing onto a public chain that ends up paying gas fees to North Korean actors. Cannot be. So the hurdle is quite clear. At the point at which these public infrastructures can meet the requirements of TPRM, then we can envisage using them at institutional scale. But that is not true at the moment.
When you use the XRP ledger, you burn a fraction of XRP. It doesn't go to anyone, you burn it. Citibank chose to use the Ethereum ledger. It's private and permissioned. It's an EVM chain. Same thing with JP Morgan. They used EVM chains for their private and permissioned system. What Tony McLaughlin is saying is very apparent to me is that Ethereum can never be the bridge between all these different assets because the Ethereum network's never going to bend a knee to what the regulators want. Ethereum's philosophy is that Ethereum overthrows the entire financial system, and Ethereum is at the center of it. But that's never going to happen unless they do these things that comply with law, and that's against Ethereum's philosophy. So good luck.
Imagine that Ethereum becomes a commerce platform and not just a place for, moving NFTs and CryptoKitties and what have you, but imagine that real businesses want to use a public blockchain. Unless the CBDC is on that public blockchain, it's not a substitute. Unless the bank-issued tokens are on that public blockchain, it's not a substitute. So I think we have to be very precise about what these instruments are and what utility they'll have, and much of it depends upon the venue in which they operate.
The entire internet, when it was formed, has had the creativity and no restrictions or it was able to thrive, and all different types of applications came out of it. What the regulated liability network is trying to do, what SWIFT is trying to do, is they're trying to make it so these silos speak to each other. But the reason they can even get to that point where silos can speak to each other is because of the crypto movement. Chainlink's the reason why these silos can speak to each other, and that's why if you cut off the internet of value here, you're never going to progress. And it's not like the United States can cut off the internet of value here, because the rest of the world's going to continue on with or without the United States. So Ray Dalio is saying the disruptors are about to be disrupted. Here's a chart of Citibank. Look at it. It looks like the middlemen are about to be disrupted.
Instruments like SWIFT or through networks like SWIFT. So what we're really doing with these messages is we're trying to coordinate debits and credits across lots of different islands of data. On a shared ledger, essentially we've got a common computational platform, a common essentially database on which multiple entities can coordinate and orchestrate settlements. So there's even without us going to the public networks, there's still potential for us to make settlements better by operating on a shared computational substrate, like a private permissioned blockchain.
And
the incumbents are reactionary to a large degree. What's going to happen is the regulators are going to throw a phone book of regulation at the innovators. The innovators are going to take this phone book and make a solution based on this phone book of regulations. And this is already happening with MiCA regulations in the EU. And they've already created systems that are on these open public ledgers. Now, Tony McLaughlin's talking about two different counterparties linking up together and settling trade somehow that way through the regulated liability network. But it's not going to be that simple. The best, most efficient way to move value is for open public ledgers with liquidity built on chain to manage liquidity with AI, with machine learning, what Project Spectrum is doing to make the most efficient use of liquidity out there.
Which once again, banks have no interest in and won't be doing. Much more than that, CSDs, messaging systems like SWIFT, and various other key market players don't want another settlement system. They want to simply connect to their counterparty and transact.
The status quo wants to keep the status quo. That's why Chainlink bridging between two different private permission systems is just what SWIFT is looking for. It's just what Citi is looking for. But the real vision behind the Internet of Value is to have ultra-liquid settlement ledgers. These ledgers are open to everyone, public for everyone to tap into, to use. Now, that doesn't take away from Chainlink being able to connect two ledgers together. Bridging is a very important part of the crypto ecosystems, but this is what's happening with the XRP ledger. They're figuring out ways to create side chains and bridge to different ledgers like burn to mint and different innovations. Chainlink partnering with SWIFT is just a desperate attempt for SWIFT to stay relevant. The Internet of Value is going to come at a rapid pace. When these regulations come forth and these stablecoin regulations come forth, and small, medium, large enterprises can start staking their assets and then earning a yield on it, like the option call that we discussed earlier, there's going to be a floodgate of wealth that comes into the crypto ecosystem that's public and open for everybody to use as long as they comply with their digital identity.
We want to work with other banks like we've done on the regulated liability network with the Fed and other banks. Like clients don't want, individual bank tokens. They want multi-token, multi-border liquidity for added efficiencies.
When Ryan Ruggers said that tokenized deposits are coming on chain, she negated the need for a regulated liability network. She negated the need for a private version of Ethereum. As soon as tokenized deposits enter the crypto world, they aren't coming out. The pie grows drastically and the decentralized ledgers absorb wealth, public pools of liquidity that anyone can tap into. Banks hoarding liquidity is a vision of the future that is constrained. That is not the fullest potential. You want smaller banks, firms, individual investors to have as little boundaries as possible. Decentralized ledgers that provide access to public pools of liquidity, that have rules baked in, without a guardian that can corrupt the ledger at will. That's the future. Public pools of liquidity that anyone can tap into. With public pools, you have an efficient system, a system where fees aren't reduced by bips but by points, where velocity can move to the highest possible denominator at zero marginal cost. The system that I'm describing is not controlled by the big banks. It's a foundation of liquidity. Liquidity by all for all. Do things that incumbents can't or won't do because it's economically or technically infeasible. Thanks, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the show. Please take a moment to like and subscribe. If you enjoy content like this, please consider joining my Patreon or my Ghost site, dmjr.ghost.io. Thanks, everyone.